Hello there, welcome back to The Closet Historian. Today I have another thrift flip sort of video for you all. Today it's a bit more fixes and flips, one flip and a couple of fixes basically. I have been collecting a few things here in the sewing room. If you've watched my last few thrift hauls, things like that, I've mentioned picking up a couple of things that needed just to be taken in a little bit or need a new zipper, maybe a new hem, things like that. But today I just wanted to get to some of the more fall-ish items in my mending, in my flip pile, because of course it is now properly fall here, now that it's October, and the pumpkins are out. We're ready for fall flips, no? But I thought if I was going to be making any alterations or doing any sort of thrift flip things, I should document it to show all of you, since a lot of people seem to like my last video in this sort of genre. So I'm going to be making here another one for you. We all know, like I said in my last video, I'm not a huge fan of mending and altering things, and I think I got a little bit frustrated with one of the items in this video, and it was really reminding me again why I just don't do this, and I prefer to sew from scratch, because trying to fix things to be asking more of something than it ever should have had to do, I guess, it's just not my jam. But I powered through, and although I had to change my plans a little bit midstream, I think it still worked out in the end, and I'll be happy to wear the dress anyway, but we'll get to that in a second. And the first alteration I did today was actually super simple, and it was just fixing this 50s jacket a little bit, actually. I wanted to take in this jacket. You might remember I mentioned in my haul when I was talking about this item, I included this in a vintage haul. I'll put a card up to that haul here as well, that this was just a little bit big when it came in. I ordered this jacket online from Etsy. It is actually quote-unquote true vintage, not my favorite term. True vintage drives me nuts. I think, you don't have to wear true vintage to have vintage style, but whole nother topic. But this jacket is from the 1950s, and so I wanted to be careful when I was making any alterations to it. And basically the waist on this is just a little bit too big for me. Everywhere else fits pretty nicely, but I just wanted to take in this waist a little tiny bit, so I just did a very small alteration to the back of this. This has like a sort of half lining in the back of the jacket, or around the bottom of the jacket. So I just clipped away the little thread tack holding this lining into place, and then I took the center back seam here and I added in a double-ended dart here, just taking in about a 1/2 inch or 5/8 of an inch pinch of fabric out of this very center back area, just to slim down the waist a little bit more, because it's just a little bit too roomy. I don't mind having some room in my clothing, some ease, but this just seemed like a little bit too much, so I wanted to take in a little double-ended dart back here, just tapering out to nothing above and below the waist area, just to give this a little bit more of a nipped waist, which is the kind of thing I'm used to. I think if I wear this, I could probably wear this somehow with a belt as well in the future perhaps, but I just wanted a little bit more of an hourglass shape to this jacket because it's just a little smooth for me. And after putting in that dart, I just went ahead and tacked the lining back into place up here with a little thread tack, just a couple of stitches, and tying those off, so it was all back together again. I didn't even cut open that dart or remove the original stitching or anything, because I wanted to leave it in there in case in the future for some reason I decided to pass this jacket on or sell it or something like that. I wanted someone to be able to remove this little dart that I put in, because this is a true vintage piece. I didn't want to mess with it too much. Sometimes I will ravage a piece of vintage, sometimes I will be careful and take care with it, and this was just one of those times where I wanted to do just a small change that would be reversible for someone else in the future if they wanted to let that back out. So here's the before and the after of the fit of this jacket. I'm not sure you all will be able to tell much of a difference. I do feel a little bit better in it. It just feels a little bit more slimline to me while I'm wearing it, I suppose, and I feel like I will get more out of it now. Before, I think I was hesitant to wear it just because it seemed a little frumpy because it was larger in the waist, and now it's just a little bit more taken in, and I feel like I can make it work a little bit more now. How often am I going to say little bit in this video? Let's not count. But just a small, tiny little alteration to start me off here before I jump into some more irritating projects. And the next project I have to show you is going to be fixing this velvet dress I found. This is a velvet, probably 1980s, I would say latter half of the 80s, Laura Ashley dress. So again, something that is technically true vintage in some ways, but not like mid-century vintage. This is more of an 80s or maybe even an early 90s piece. It's got a nice little puff sleeve going on. It's a very witchy dress. I really liked it, but it was just a bit tight, which was compounded by the fact that this had a side zipper going on, and then it had this little bow in the back I wasn't a huge fan of, and I really wanted to fill in this keyhole if possible, which ended up not exactly working out for me, but I will show you what I was able to do on this dress to make it work a little bit better for me and my wardrobe. The first thing I did was I went ahead and took that bow off the back of this, and I was going to use that fabric to try and fill in the keyhole, so I definitely took the bow off and then tried to preserve the fabric so I could use it possibly, which sort of did and did not happen at the same time. We'll get to it. But then the second thing I did was I went ahead and inside the dress, I opened up the area where the zipper was, removed the zipper, opened up all those seams, and then I sewed the velvet back together and then sewed the lining. I kind of whip stitched the lining back down together too, so that that seam was entirely enclosed, or closed like a regular seam would be, instead of having that zipper in there in the side. Then of course my dress had no closure and no way to get in or out of it. But luckily in the very back under the keyhole where that bow had been, there was a seam there. Not in the skirt, but in the bodice there was, so I had some wiggle room to take that apart. So I went ahead and took my seam ripper out and went to town and took apart that little seam in the back of the bodice, and then I cut down into the skirt as well to be able to put a zipper into that back area there. So I would have a center back zipper instead of having a side zipper. So I was able to get a center back zipper in here. Everything worked out okay. I had to add in a little panel of velvet that I actually took from the bow that was back here. I added in like a tiny little 5/8 of an inch almost panel to one side of the back bodice to make it fit a little bit better, because again, this dress was a tiny bit tight after I washed it. I did just wash this in the washing machine and then hang it to dry. After I tried it on thrifting, it fit a little bit better in the store because I'm sure it was stretched out a tiny bit. But after I washed it, this is a cotton velvet, it did shrink up a tiny bit. And I was like, ooh, I need to be able to breathe a little bit more. So I did add then this tiny little panel in here. And then I added in the zipper to the center back area. Of course, the very top edge of this, however, was not very pretty anymore. I was able to kind of hand stitch everything down and get everything structurally back together. It just wasn't gorgeous anymore up here near the keyhole. And this is where I decided I was going to try and fill in the back area with some panels of velvet that I took from the bow. But I even like basted these in, sewed them in, and then when I tried it on, it still was gaping in a strange way. Nothing was really working out, and I sort of had to give up on the idea of filling in this keyhole. This dress, the edge of the keyhole here has like some serious thick piping going on, that to get all of that out and to restructure everything was just going to be a lot of seam ripping and a lot of restructuring. I was hoping that this back, because this back of this dress has princess seam lines, but they're actually curved darts, not seam lines in general. So I was going to replace the back panels entirely, but then I didn't have the fabric for that, and I just decided, you know what, I'm going to have to give up on my idea of filling in this keyhole. I'm just going to have to live with the fact that this dress has an open back. But to make myself feel a little bit better about it, and down here where the zipper was being a little bit jaggedy, I wanted to fix that. I decided to, you know, if I was going to go for the goth witchy dress, I might as well go 110% all the way in. So I grabbed some black lace that I had in my stash and decided to add that around the keyhole for a little bit more of a crimson peak touch, just really going all in on the goth look for this dress. And, you know, now I really wanted to be able to wear this in a more day sort of way, which is why I wanted to fill in the back. But now it's sort of more still of an evening dress. And the biggest problem with this keyhole is that it's too big, so it shows my bra strap in the back. But I think if I wear a lace camisole or a lace trimmed camisole, it'll be sort of okay. You guys let me know. Is this too scandalous? Can I have an open back with a cami underneath? What are your thoughts? I'm also considering layering blouses underneath this dress, possibly, like so I can have a collar and then the back will be full. Let me know what you would layer underneath this dress to make it more of a daytime look. How would you style this to look more day? I'm open to suggestions. But all that fiddly work with this velvet wasn't the most fun thing ever. Luckily, stitches do kind of get lost in velvet, so that is one nice perk of working with it. But sometimes working with velvet, you get a lot of black or whatever color the velvet is fluff everywhere in your sewing room as well. So it's kind of little puffs of black fluff everywhere now in here, but that's okay. I will just have to vacuum. And then the third item I wanted to show you was how I turned this very, very 1980s dress into something I could wear for my wardrobe. This dress, I mean, I wanted it to fit, honestly, because I felt like I could make it into like almost a princess dress somehow. But it was just, these sleeves were just too huge, and it was actually just a little bit too tight on me in the bust. In the waist and the hips and everything, this was fine, but the sleeves and the bust were just a bit too tight on me. So I bought this dress because I fell in love with this color of taffeta. I mean, ooh, it's gorgeous. I love a iridescent taffeta. Even though this is a polyester taffeta, not a silk taffeta, I still thought it was a good, you know, it was like, I think $6 for this dress. It was a good price for this much of this really pretty colored fabric. And because I know I'm doing a Slytherin lookbook video here soon on the channel, I wanted to grab this because it was just the perfect color. So I got this 80s dress home. I took the little bead trim off of it. I separated the skirt from the bodice. And because this skirt had that sort of V shape at the top, I went ahead and straightened out. I just measured up from the hem 30 inches and all the way around the skirt and cut off the excess around the top because the skirt was attached to a V-shaped bodice, not a straight across bodice. So this top of the skirt was all uneven. So I evened that all out. And then I made a waistband again with the bow from this dress. The bows on 80s dresses, I don't want to keep them, but they are useful as a source for extra fabric. So I used the bow to cut a new waistband, put some interfacing on that. And then I ended up putting a zipper in the side of the skirt just because there was a tear in the fabric that I wanted to avoid, so I had to create a seam out of that. And so I just decided that the easiest way to work around this was to put the zipper in the side. And I did actually pleat this fabric down to that waistband. Originally it was gathered, and I could have gathered it again, but I just decided that it was like a crinkly fabric, and I thought either way it was going to have a lot of body to it because it just has a lot of stiffness, this fabric. So I decided that I would try and keep it a little bit slimmer up near the waist by doing pleats instead, because I could keep them kind of flat as opposed to gathering, which is just going to be puffy from the get-go. But for pleating this skirt, I decided to use a sort of 18th century petticoat pleat pattern. So I kept it very smooth in the center front, and then did knife pleats from there out to the side seams. And then in the back, I did sort of like an inverted box pleat in the center, and then knife pleats from there. So this is inspired by 18th century petticoat pleating patterns, just because I really like the 18th century, and I've made 18th century costumes in the past, and so I just like this kind of pleating pattern. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to do anything very measured like these. I sort of just eyeballed all these pleats because I had this random length of fabric. It wasn't something I had cut with planning 2" by 2" by 2" pleats. I more just sort of did the centers the way I wanted it and then pleated the rest to fit the waistband basically. So you don't have to do this in a very specific way. Just pleat it down. Make sure each side basically is the same, but that's all you really have to do when it comes to pleating something like this where you're just doing a fix. So I went ahead and pleated everything down to the waistband, sewed that all on, and of course the hem was already finished because of having taken it off a dress. So the skirt was nearly ready to go. I just finished it up with a skirt hook up at the waistband, and the skirt was ready to wear. I think it's going to be really good for the holidays, of course. It's a very Christmas party skirt. I'm hoping to style it a bit more goth or Halloween here for this month, but then I think into the November, December season it'll come in handy as much more of a Christmas party style skirt. I think I have a velvet jacket that I think will look really good with this, so it's going to be a bit more cheerful eventually, but for now I'm going to try and make it work in a spooky way. Hopefully I can make that work. So those are the items that I've had on my sewing table this week, finally getting around to fixing a few things and then flipping that green dress. I hope you enjoyed seeing me work through these projects a little bit today, just seeing what I've had on the sewing table. I do feel bad anytime I do anything down here and don't mention it or don't show you or talk about it, so I wanted to make sure I included, you know, thrift flipping here on the channel, since I know people really like flips, even though these are more alterations today. But, you know, sometimes you have small things to fix, and that mending pile has to get, you know, the fixing and mending has to get done somehow. And again, for me, I've noticed this past year, if I include my sewing as part of like my tasks for here on the channel, it really helps me get that done. So thank you all for motivating me to actually get my thrift fixes and flips done, because it really does help having a like deadline in some ways to do those. Otherwise, I'll just let them sit here forever. And I do have a couple more that they're more summery, and I fear that they will be here until next summer. But thank you as always for tuning in today, and I'll see you all again here on the channel soon. Bye.